country diggers, welcome to the Speakeasy. Today we'll be going into the Bloody Century, True Tales of Murder in 19th Century America by Robert Wilhelm, who also does the murderbygaslight.com website. Today we will be reading about Clan-Na-Gael. Okay, so stay tuned. All right, Clan-Na-Gael. Dr. Patrick Henry Cronin, who was a prominent Chicago physician and a member of Clan-Na-Gael, an American political organization formed to promote Irish independence from British rule. Clan-Na-Gael was very effective at raising large sums of money for the cause, but the money was administered in secret by 3 members of the executive board, led by Chicago lawyer Alexander Sullivan. When Dr. Cronin criticized the board's secrecy, accused them of embezzling funds, he was denounced as a traitor and a British spy. When his accusations persisted, Sullivan marked him for death, and on May 4th, 1889, Dr. Cronin disappeared. Date, May 4th, 1889. Location, Chicago, Illinois. Victim, Dr. Patrick Henry Cronin. Cause of death, stab wounds to the head. Accused, members of Clan-Na-Gael. Clan-Na-Gael was the public name of a secret organization for Irish independence, known to its members as the United Brotherhood. It was formed to replace the Fenian Brotherhood, which was discredited in America after their ill-conceived attempt to invade Canada in 1866. Clan-Na-Gael was modeled after other secret societies, such as the Freemasons with secret codes and symbols, initiation rites, and other oaths and rituals. The organization had chapters known as camps in every major city. Camp 20 in Chicago was their headquarters. In 1881, Clan-Na-Gael held a convention in Chicago at which they established a 5-man executive board to govern the organization. It wasn't long before 3 members of the board realized that acting together they could control every vote. Sounds familiar, don't it? Okay. Alexander Sullivan of Chicago, Michael Boland of Louisville, Kentucky, and D.S. Freely of Rochester, New York, known formally as the Triangle, informally as the Triangle, worked together to control Clan-Na-Gael Clan-Na-Gael in secret. Clan-Na-Gael was accused of supplying money and men for the Dynamite War, a terrorist campaign in England. If true, this accusation would have alienated the more moderate members of the group. The Triangle vehemently denied the charge, but was unable or unwilling to account for Clan-Na-Gael funds, estimated to be between $100,000 and $250,000. Dr. Cronin publicly denounced the Triangle and demanded an accounting. Patrick Henry Cronin was born in County Cork in Ireland in 1846, and he was quite young. And when he was quite young, moved with his family to Canada, where when he was 23, he moved to St. Louis, Missouri. Cronin was a very charismatic and ambitious young man. He had a fine tenor voice, and though a devout Catholic, Cronin sang in a choir of the Second Baptist Church. He was working as a porter for a wholesale house, but but his winning personality impressed several St. Louis businessmen who provided him with better employment and assisted with his education. Cronin began studying pharmacy, but changed it to medicine and graduated from the Arcanum, joined a... Wait. Okay. He set up a practice in St. Louis and joined a number of benevolent groups and secret societies, such as Royal Arcanum, Chosen Friends, and Clan-Na-Gael. When he moved to Chicago in 1882, he joined the Foresters and the Royal League. In Chicago, he met and joined the anti-triangle faction of Clan-Na-Gael, and soon became their spokesman. The Triangle retaliated by accusing Cronin of being a British spy. In Camp 20, he was brought to trial before a committee of its members, including Dan Coughlin, a detective in the Chicago Police Department. Cronin was found guilty of treason and expelled from the order. But Cronin now had a large following within Clan-Na-Gael, and thousands of members quit the organization in sympathy and formed their own camps. Leaders of both factions realized the goal of Irish independence could not be met unless they all worked together, and urged their members to bury the hatchet. Dr. Cronin agreed, provided with the actions of the Triangle were fully investigated. A committee of 6, including Dr. Cronin, investigated the Triangle, but voted 4-2 that the charges had not been proven. Cronin called it a whitewash and threatened to make his notes of the proceedings public so the world would know that the treachery of the Triangle. Triangle leaders Alexander Sullivan was reportedly heard to say he wished Cronin could be removed, in parentheses, removed. In Chicago, Dr. Cronin was approached by Patrick O'Sullivan, owner of an ice house in Lakeview, Illinois, offering him a job as the company physician. For $8 a month, Cronin agreed to respond whenever one of O'Sullivan's employees needed medical attention. It was an odd arrangement, since Cronin did not live near the ice house. Plus, O'Sullivan had only 4 employees, and their work was not hazardous. On May 4th, 1889, a man came to Cronin's house in a carriage asking for assistance for an injured worker at O'Sullivan's ice house. Several people saw Dr. Cronin leave in a carriage pulled by a white horse. He never returned home, and Dr. Cronin's friends suspected that he had been murdered. When a blood-stained trunk was found north of the city, containing what appeared to be strands of Dr. Cronin's hair, they were convinced. But he was reportedly seen on a streetcar by a friend late that night. The sighting was verified by the streetcar conductor, and on May 10th, Chicago newspapers received a dispatch from Toronto claiming that Dr. Cronin was in Canada on his way to England. He had admitted to being a British spy and was on his way to testify against Clan-Na-Gael. The matter was settled on May 22nd, when the Public Works Department in Lakeview was investigating a jammed sewer. The workmen found the decomposing body of Dr. Cronin, wedged into the catch bin. He was completely naked with a bloody towel wrapped around his neck. Beneath the towel around his neck, he wore a Catholic medal depicting the Lamb of God. When the body was examined, the coroner found 5 scalp wounds made by a sharp, narrow weapon, such as an ice pick. The investigation began near O'Sullivan's ice house, where neighbors told police about a strange man who had rented a cottage nearby and never moved in. Though the cottage was unoccupied, sometimes lights burned inside late at night. When police went to the carriage, they could tell at a glance that it was the scene of the murder. There was a considerable amount of blood on the front step and in several of the rooms, and the floor had recently been painted yellow in a clumsy attempt to hide the blood. They traced the furniture to Revel's furniture store. There they learned the furniture items, as well as the bloodstained trunk, had been rented by a man calling himself J.R. Simmons. Police suspected that Simmons was actually Pat Cooney, alias the Fox, a companion of O'Sullivan and Detective Coughlin, and a bitter enemy of Cronin's. Police identified the house and carriage and found that it had been rented the day of the murder by Detective Dan Coughlin. John Kunza, a friend of Coughlin, was identified as the man who drove the carriage. On June 29th, O'Sullivan, Coughlin, Cooney, and Crunez were indicted for the murder of Dr. Cronin, along with Frank Burke, Frank Woodruff, and John Beggs, members of Camp 20 and associates of Coughlin. Burke fled to Winnipeg, but was captured there, and after a long and bitter extradition hearing, was returned under heavy guard to Chicago. Alexander Sullivan was also arrested at the recommendation of the coroner's jury. It was not the first time Sullivan was arrested for murder. In 1876, Frank Hanford, principal of the school where Sullivan's wife was teaching, accused Mrs. Sullivan of creating dissension on the school board. Sullivan and his wife paid a visit on Mr. Hanford. A squabble ensued, and Sullivan shot and killed Hanford. After 2 trials, Alexander Sullivan was acquitted. In the Cronin murder, Sullivan was released on $20,000 bail, and charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. The trial, August 26, 1889. Beggs, Coughlin, Burke, O'Sullivan, and Crunez. The trial went on for 3.5 months, with closing arguments lasting 14 days. The prosecution charged that Dr. Cronin had been condemned to die by a tribunal self-constituted, a tribunal that was accuser, witness, judge, and executioner at the same time, a tribunal which hides itself from the light of day. Alternatively, the defense tried to paint Dr. Cronin as a violent radical and a British spy. The jury deliberated for several hours before returning a mixed verdict. Verdict: John F. Beggs, not guilty. John Crunez, guilty of manslaughter. Daniel Coughlin, Patrick O'Sullivan, Martin Burke, guilty of first-degree murder. There was not enough evidence against Frank Woodruff, and his case was stricken from the docket. Crunez appealed his verdict and was granted a new trial, which resulted in his acquittal. Coughlin was granted a new trial on the grounds that 2 jurors were prejudiced against him. He was also acquitted on the second trial. Aftermath: the murder of Dr. Cronin was called at the time the crime of the century. There's always a crime of the century, right? OJ, remember OJ? Crime of the century right there. Lizzie Borden, crime of the century. Okay. Obviously, we have a lot of crime of the centuries. But as Edmund Pearson pointed out, anyone with the faintest knowledge of Chicago who remembered that city has a crime of the century every 4 to 5 years. Dr. Cronin certainly had one of Chicago's most spectacular funerals. Nearly 8,000 men, Hibernians, Clan-Na-Gaels, foresters, and members of Catholic benevolent societies and other orders of which Cronin was member, marched in line. The procession included several drum corps and a marching band. After his release from prison, Daniel Coughlin opened a saloon in Chicago, but he did not stay in business long. He was charged with attempting to bribe jurors in damaged suitcases. When he was an employee at the Illinois Railroad Company. When the indictments were brought against him, Coughlin fled to Honduras. Patrick O'Sullivan and Martin Burke died in the penitentiary. A modern observer of the murder of Dr. Cronin is left with the feeling that the real conspirators were not charged and the true story has never been told. To quote Edmund Pearson once more, it was one of those murders over which men nod their heads and look portentous and intimate that imitate that everything hasn't come out yet. Okay. So it was one of those murders over which men nod their heads and look pretentious and imitate that everything hasn't come out yet. It seems like history repeating itself sometimes. All right, that was Clan-Na-Gael. So hope y'all enjoyed and see you soon.